Good evening. I'm Shaylin, the Association Manager for AACP, and I would like to thank you for attending AACP's webinar with Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman presenting the Warrior Mindset. Lieutenant Colonel Grossman has no conflicts of interest. Registrants can expect to receive a recording of this presentation via email within 5 to 7 business days, and attendees will receive their CE certificate of attendance within 30 days of the webinar air date. I would also like to briefly mention some upcoming events for the AACP. The AACP's next complimentary webinar will be October 11th with Dr. Stacy Ochoa presenting early identification and treatment for pediatric sleep disordered breathing. Also, AACP's Advanced Injection Mini Symposium in South Bend, Indiana, October 28th through 29th. Registration is open on aacfp.org. I would like to introduce tonight's moderator, Dr. Angie Tenholder. Dr. Angie is a general dentist, is board certified in the American Board of Craniofacial Dental Sleep Medicine, and currently serves as the president on the ABCDSM Board of Directors. She has achieved fellowship status in the American Academy of Craniofacial Pain and currently serves as the chairperson for AACP's Board of Directors Education Committee. She has years of experience as an instructor with Synergy Academy and the ALF Interface Academy. By working closely with Dr. Nordstrom, the combination of professional guidance and personal experience has allowed her to use her knowledge as a former chronic pain patient, a parent of children with orofacial challenges, and a provider of patients with medical challenges to creatively utilize the many tools available to her, including ALF therapy, oral lays, and baby lays services. She has been providing oral lace therapy daily in her general dental practice since 2018 and is the developer of Baby Lace. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Tenholder.
Hello, and welcome to the Academy of Craniofacial Pain monthly webinar series for August of 2022. This month's webinar is on the warrior mindset, understanding the role of the healthcare provider in caring for those subjected to violence and stress. My name is Dr. Angie Tenholder. I am a dentist. I am the education chairperson for the Academy of Craniofacial Pain and the president for the American Board of Craniofacial Dental Sleep Medicine. I have a fellowship in the Academy of General Dentistry, but I am a Mrs. and I am a mom. This is my patient. I want to introduce you to retired Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. He's an internationally recognized scholar, author, soldier, and speaker who is one of the world's foremost experts in the field of human aggression and the roots of violence and violent crime. He is my patient, and I asked him to help me with this webinar because we talk about what he does while he's in my chair all the time, and we also talk about what I do when he's in my chair. And he may be retired from the U.S. Army, but he is most definitely not retired from serving our country and our communities, and he wanted to reach out to our community to help us improve our level of patient care. Colonel Grossman is a former Airborne Ranger Infantry officer, paratrooper. He is a former West Point psychology professor and professor of military science who has combined his experiences to bring forward revolutionary new concepts and understanding the physiology of the stress response. And he does this through the lifespan because his contributions are not only for the adult members of our armed forces, our men on the front lines, both in battle, but also in protecting our communities with EMS, first responders, police officers, firefighters. And his contributions include improving our understanding of the psychological costs of violence in the battlefield in our communities, but also in the bedrooms of our children as they watch through media and on the news and in video games. Violence, which is sometimes difficult for their little developing brains to understand the difference between fact and fiction and fantasy. He serves those who serve us. He is the author or co-author of 10 books, including a New York Times bestseller titled On Killing, which has sold over 500,000 copies worldwide and has been translated in 5 languages. It's on the U.S. Marine Corps Commandant's required reading list, which my son, when he was in the Marine Corps, was required to read. And it's also required reading at the FBI Academy and numerous other academies and colleges. His presentations to organizations include those to the American Medical Association, American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as the American Psychiatric and American Psychological Associations. And as a distinguished speaker, as well as an expert witness in presidential and congressional committees, he dedicates his life and energy to helping organizations like ours to better serve our communities and patients by sharing his wisdom and passion for helping others. Because as Steve Jobs said it, those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world usually do. Because life is a battlefield and we need all the help we can get. And we truly do live in unprecedented times. And by explaining his background, I hope to tie in why I asked him to share his perspective with our community of providers who are often asked to provide care for patients who have been affected by the impact of violence. Some of those patients were aware that they have been subjected to violence because of their jobs. Others, we have no idea that they've been subjected to that violence, and they carry that burden, and sometimes that burden becomes very, very heavy in adult environments where they have to be vulnerable and there's additional stress. So when Colonel Grossman and I share our conversations, we can easily get lost in how closely our world are intertwined in dealing with patients and colleagues. And we both have a passion for educating on understanding how the autonomic nervous system influences every aspect of our lives and every minute of our days. We share a common goal of helping people understand that the attempts that we use to regulate our state of physical and emotional well-being help us survive and thrive in a complicated and violent world. And this is where my professional life meets my personal one, because that man in the middle in the baseball cap is my husband. He is a 20-year veteran of the United States Air Force. The man farthest on the right on the screen is my son, who is a Marine. The impact of the violence that they encountered while they were serving our country affects every single person in this picture, in my family and my extended family. And it is a generational thing. So if we as people can help those who have had the responsibility of shouldering this violence, help them understand that it is okay for them to feel the way they do, that they're just physiological needs that struggle with stress, and we can help them better understand how to cope with that violence of the world that we all live in. Colonel Grossman's books have been very impactful in helping my husband. He has them on his shuffle, on his iPod in his car. And he tells me over and over again that just helps him feel more normal to be able to understand that this is a normal thing that people go through. And it's also helped me to manage and understand his chronic pain as well as manage his sleep disordered breathing. I hope that you can all appreciate the level of passion and experience that you'll be able to immediately take back to your offices and your homes, thanks to the wisdom of our subject matter expert, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. And as I leave you to enjoy his pre-recorded content, I want to introduce you to some informational links that you can choose to continue your educational journey on this whole concept of the mental-dental connection and the autonomic nervous system. Dr. Grossman's bio on Wikipedia, there's the link there. There's a site that I've created, which is a concept site. And one of those concepts with holistic orthodontics is the mental-dental connection. It talks about important aspects of physiology that we affect and can influence. The reference and resources, the literature, can be found on the Synergy Academy website. And anyone who has any questions or comments about this content, wanting more information, please reach out to Shaylin at aacfp.org, and she will help you get in contact with the people, including me, if you have questions. And I just want to briefly go over these 2 cartoons that we have, because those of us in the dental arena, might be able to joke about this a little bit, but it's true. Are you the trigeminal nerve? Because you make my jaw drop. We have such an impact over the trigeminal nerve, and the trigeminal nerve has an amazing impact over the limbic system, which the cartoon on the left, the little guy holding up that past trauma is a heart. And that's a lot that he's carrying. So all the stress of the pandemic and the bad news and the past trauma, and those first responders also have violence on that. And they're going along carrying this heavy load, and there's one little minor inconvenience that they trip over that they can fall down. And with that heavy load, there sometimes can be an overreaction, which in this cartoon is the brain saying there's an overreaction. Or it could just be a dental assistant, or it could be a husband or a spouse that doesn't understand why that minor inconvenience, which could be a dental appointment, just one stressor on top of the many other stresses that they've been carrying, might cause them to have a parasympathetic backlash, which you're going to learn a little bit more about during this presentation. So I hope you enjoy the presentation. Please feel free to reach out with any questions. And we appreciate your attendance and participation in the American Academy of Craniofacial Pain.
Hello, folks. I appreciate that wonderful intro that Dr. Angie has given. Just to kind of recap, I'm the author of the book On Killing. Google Scholars has been cited over 3,200 times in scholarly works, and also the author of the book On Combat. Again, Google Scholars has been cited over 900 times in various scholarly papers. And I want to talk to you specifically within your area of expertise about what's happening. I train cops in all 50 states for the last 25 years since I retired from the Army. I train all the federal agencies. And right up front, I want to tell you a little bit about what's happening out there. Now, homicides are being held down by medical technology. In the 1960s, an ambulance was a meat wagon. And when we finally got them to the hospital, of course, we had no 911 systems. When the ambulance finally showed up, finally got them to the hospital, the emergency care as we know it didn't even exist. So we got one good solid data point. A UMass Harvard study came out in the early 2000s in a peer-reviewed journal. It tells us that between the 1960s and the 1990s, medical technology cut the murder rate to a third or quarter would otherwise be. We all understand the idea of inflation. You know, what if somebody said, well, your grandpa made 25 cents an hour, you make $25 an hour. Look how good you got it. Well, we all know the lie there. It's inflation. When it comes to murder rates, we're really looking at deflation. Medical technology is saving ever more lives. To compare the problem over any period of time with murder is a lie. And between the 1960s and the 1990s, medical technology cut the murder rate to a third or quarter would otherwise be. So to compare the murders in the 90s, 60s, multiplied by a factor of about 3.5. And the leaps and bounds of medical technology since the 1990s are astounding. Tourniquets alone, everybody carries tourniquets today. It's the number one life-saving tool on the battlefield. Tourniquets alone have probably cut the murder rate in half in just the last decade. So to compare murders between the 60s and today, we got to multiply by a factor of about 7. I tell you all that. I briefed the president, I briefed the vice president. My area of expertise was invited to the White House, and Vice President Pence asked, well, what about the aggravated assault rate? It's too easy to fudge that data. Where do we draw that magic line between ag assault and simple assault? Any cop will tell you, we'll make ag assault say whatever you want it to say, but murder is murder. Dead is good data, as long as we allow for medical technology. And again, as medical providers, boom, you all get it. Giving us crime data over any period of time with the murder rate is like giving us minimum wage without allowing for inflation. We have inflation-adjusted dollars, we've medically adjusted murders. Now, I tell you all that to lay the foundation to understand that in the year 2020, homicides were up 30% for the previous year. The highest annual homicide increase we've ever seen was 12% one year in the 1960s. So at 30% versus 12%, almost 3 times more? No, when you allow for medical technology, 2020 was 20 times greater explosion in homicides than we've ever seen before. So just recognize that you've got traumatized individuals that will be coming into you, and understand this: of all the sources of trauma, interpersonal human aggression is the most toxic, corrosive, destructive thing anybody will face. One serial killer, one serial rapist will paralyze a city. The DSM, the Bible of Psychiatry and Psychology, says whenever the cause of your trauma is human in nature, the degree of trauma is usually more severe and long lasting. I use the example of my classes, two case studies. Number one, a tornado hits a house while you're gone, puts your family in the hospital. How do you feel about that? Well, thank God they're alive. Number two, gang of criminals break into the house while you're gone and beat your family into hospital stay. Now you feel any different? There's all the difference in the world. And understand that interpersonal human aggression has exploded like nothing we've ever seen before. And understand that of all the things that could happen, it is the most toxic, corrosive, destructive source of trauma that could ever happen in anybody's life. Now, one other aside I want to give you, and it's important. We're also in the middle of a global epidemic of sleep deprivation. 18 hours without sleep it impairs judgment. 18 hours without sleep, you've impaired judgment equal to 0.08 legally drunk. 24 hours without sleep, you have impaired judgment equal to 0.10 blood alcohol above legally drunk. 2 nights without sleep and you're psychotic. Any graduate of Army Ranger School tell about hallucinations on the 3rd day without sleep. And we're in the middle of this global epidemic of sleep deprivation. Video games are designed to be impossible to turn off. We got people that go to work all day and then that night, all night long, they play the new video game. It puts you in a flow state. You lose track of time. You stagger out of the game and go to work, and then you play the game again for the 2nd night in a row. And now, on the 3rd day, you're in your 3rd day without sleep. And I will tell you from personal experience, you will see things and hear things that are not there after about 3 days without sleep. And the social media never rests, and it becomes addictive. Binge watching TV shows. The head of Netflix recently said that their number one competitor was not other online providers. Their number one competitor is sleep. The corporate policy of Netflix, the video game industry, and all the rest of them is to steal your sleep. The video game will never tell you you've been playing this game for 48 hours straight, you need some sleep. Social media will never say you've been online for the last 3 days sleep, you've got to go get, for the last 3 days straight, you got to get some sleep. The Netflix will never say you've been binge watching the shows for the last 48 hours straight, you need to get some sleep. They will never say that. All they want to do is sell their product. And so the effect of sleep deprivation, number one, sleep deprivation is a key component in suicide. I presented the paper and the data to the first Department of Defense-wide conference on resiliency, that a sleep-deprived soldier can be up to 5 times more likely to take their life. Do an online search of sleep deprivation and suicide, boom, it'll come right up. The best meta study on suicide says not only is sleep deprivation a key factor in suicide, it's the most remediable factor. It's the one that we could do something about right now. I lost a little brother to suicide. I lost 2 nephews to suicide. A dear friend of mine just lost a brother to suicide. It's this epidemic of suicide worldwide. Around the planet, suicides have exploded. Every age group, every ethnic group, every nation on the planet, suicides have exploded. What is the new factor? A global epidemic of sleep deprivation, number one. It's also a factor in traffic deaths. We all know that. There's a reason why truck drivers and airline pilots are required to get enough sleep. Decade after decade, we brought traffic deaths down. Airbags, seatbelts, medical technology. For the last 10 years around the planet, traffic deaths have exploded. What is the new factor? The global epidemic of sleep deprivation. Suicides have exploded. It is the new factor worldwide. And traffic deaths have exploded. But additionally, the opiate epidemic. Why are opiates a drug of choice? Of all the drugs out there, prescription opiates have always been there. Why are they suddenly the drug of choice? Well, sleep deprivation creates chronic pain. Again, do another online search. Sleep deprivation and pain. Boom, it'll come right up. The muscles and tendons never get a chance to fully relax. Doc, I heard all the time, give me a pill to fix. You don't need a pill, you need more sleep. And you got to knock off the caffeine shortly after lunch. They're stopping you from getting deep cycle sleep. Now, a third major epidemic is obesity. And again, do a look for sleep deprivation, obesity, come right up. You want to lose weight, get more sleep. So to understand that 3 major causes of death that have exploded, suicides, traffic deaths, and opiate overdoses. And there's one new factor. And what we can teach people right off the bat is to sleep well, to get healthy sleep. It needs to be taught in school. Number one, you sleep in a dark room. Make the room as dark as you can. I'm a huge science geek. My favorite website, sciencedaily.com. Check it every day through every category. Major study in the sleep lab, totally dark room. Bathroom light is on, the door is shut. The light coming under the crack of the bathroom door is enough light to stop your body from producing the melatonin that you need. We're designed to sleep in absolute darkness. Combine it with a sleep mask, one of the best investments you ever make. I just sent my grandson off to college, and my college gift to him was 2 of the best rated sleep masks on Amazon, and a promise that he will use them. People say the sleep mask makes me hot. Well, that's good, because sleep in a dark, cool room. Bring the temperature down, make it dark, wear that sleep mask, you begin to rock your world. We have got to cut off the caffeine shortly after lunch. Another thing, your online search for global epidemic of caffeine abuse. And what that's doing to us, it's stopping us from getting deep cycle sleep. It's making us have bad quality sleep. So just recognize that we can improve sleep hygiene. And I spend a whole half an hour, 45 minutes in every class in military and law enforcement on sleep hygiene. But for your purpose right now, what I want to home in on is how the body responds to life and death event. And you got a copy of my book on combat, you can turn to page 31. There's a heart rate scale there. We show how the body responds at different heart rates. But it's important to understand that it is hormonal or fear-induced heart rate increase. You can do a set of wind sprints. Your heart is pounding and your face is flushed. That's vasodilation. Your body is screaming for oxygen. Every blood vessel is wide open and your face is flushed. When it's fear-induced, when it's trauma-induced, what you will see is vasoconstriction. The face goes white. Now look carefully as you look at your patients. Watch for that vasoconstriction, sometimes called the mask of fear, as the white comes across the eyes, around the lips. When the whole face goes white, watch out, because you're no longer dealing with a rational human being. So what we're looking at is vasoconstriction. Now the body shuts down the blood flow to the outer layer of the body in preparation to take trauma. Let's say you're fighting a wolf. You're trying to cave the wolf's head in with a rock. If the wolf wins, your family's dog food. You're not fighting for your life. You're fighting for your genes. You're fighting for the survival of your family, your tribe. The wolf's jaws can shred your arm, but not get to the artery. The vasoconstriction shuts down the blood flow to the outer layer of the body. That's why your hands are cold and clammy, and fine motor control goes out. But this vasoconstriction, you can shred the arm and not get to the artery. You can shred the chest and not puncture the body cord. Long, sustained, vicious battle, he shreds your arm, the wolf shreds your chest, but he doesn't puncture the body cord. And of course, your blood pressure skyrockets. Anytime you see stress-induced increase in blood pressure, pretty much vasoconstriction doing it. But you win the battle, you cave his head in, you've saved your family, then you relax, and then you bleed out and die. Because the body will always backlash in the opposite direction. The day we slap a tourniquet on the wound, we survive in the battle because of vasoconstriction. We survive after the battle because of our friend, Mr. Tourniquet. But here's what I want to get to you now. I want to home in on a specific dynamic of the psychology and physiology of what's happening in your mind and body. A simple model we're going to put together here of the human brain. We got the forebrain, and what happens in the forebrain? Rational thought, everything that makes you human. Rational thought. Lying underneath the forebrain, probably called the midbrain or the mammalian brain. Now, just to get you oriented, here's your little beady bloodshot eye looking out this way. Inside the midbrain goes everything every living creature has in common. What do you, your dog, the bacteria in your body have in common? Well, forgive me, a joke in this 1950 psychophysiology textbook, research on a modern textbook. That function of the midbrain can be thought of as the 4 F's. The 4 F's are fight and flee, food, and reproduction. Now, every living creature has some form of fight or flight response in their environment, takes in an energy, and reproduces. It's the definition of life. When we become angry, when we become frightened, the forebrain shuts down. And the midbrain, the part of the brain, same as your dog, reaches up and hijacks the forebrain. There's no rational thought of that person's head. Have you ever tried to have a rational discussion with a truly angry, frightened person? You can't do it because there's nobody home. You know why you can't have a rational conversation with a frightened, angry person? Because you're trying to argue with their dog through the mail slot. With a frightened human being, we got to calm them down first. Now, let's talk in a minute how we calm people down, but I'll give you another angle on this model. I was a West Point psychology professor. I came up through the ranks of an OCS grad. I loved teaching at West Point. And the top psych minds, the top military minds put their heads together. What do we want every West Point officer to know about this psychology stuff? Way up on the list is this: sympathetic nervous system, also known as fight or flight, and parasympathetic nervous system, also known as feed and breed, and feed and breed. There's your 4 F's: fight or flight, feed and breed, and sometimes called rest and digest. But fight or flight, feed and breed. And I tell people, if you think I'm making this stuff, just do it. Make it up. Do an online search for feed and breed. It'll come right up. So sympathetic nervous system, we tell our cadets, is like, think your body like a military unit. These are the folks in the front lines with the rifle. They're the defensive elements, fight or flight. These are the maintenance folks, the cooks, the clerks, the bakers, mechanics. And when you're asleep at night, the unit's on stand down. You're in maintenance mode. You're on guard at the front gate. You wake up in the morning, hit what we call homeostasis. Got some folks in the front line with a rifle. Maintenance folks doing their job. Back to sleep that night. You're on stand down, wake up in the morning, and somebody tries to kill you. Boom! Total sympathetic nervous system arousal. Digestion, we don't need no stinking digestion. Blow the ballast. And the further you go up here, boom, the further you come down there. Now, let's talk about that parasympathetic backlash. A lot of people after a traumatic event will gorge themselves, feed and breed. And a lot of people will seek very intense sex. I recently had the honor to train all of the U.S. Army sexual assault and harassment investigators and counselors, and they're all over this. We understand that crime victims very often will seek affirmation of healthy relationship. It's a biological backlash. Frank Herbert called it the universal drive of every living species for immortality through progeny in the face of death. Just understand that a lot of crime victims, a lot of other individuals, and a lot of first responders will be in a traumatic event and then go home and seek very intense sex. Both partners very invested in that, and it frightens people. We just need to know it. But also, a lot more commonly, we know people whose response to stress is that turn to food and gorge themselves. Now, first off, how do we calm somebody down who's up in that frightened state? I want to give you a couple of state-of-the-art dynamics. One of the universals has taken off. Now, starting in the 1980s, I interviewed World War II vets and Vietnam vets by the hundreds for my book on killing. And starting in the 1980s, as they discussed their combat experience, I knew if they started to become emotional, they were re-experiencing the event. Something counterproductive was happening. I'd make them stop and breathe. Today, we put a bottle of water in front of them. And every time they start to become emotional, they stop and take a swig of water. And it's really interesting to understand that swig of water pulls you from fight or flight to rest and digest, fight or flight to feed and breed. It calms people down. I tell people, a deer's being chased by a wolf. He stopped and get a drink. He's really thirsty. I can't get a drink. I'm being chased by a wolf. The fact that you stop and take that big swig of water sends a message to the body that says, we're safe. A friend of mine is one of our nation's leading therapists for federal agents. After a federal agent has been in a deadly force incident, they're required to see a mental health provider. She's the one. And they talk about what happened to them. And if they start to become emotional, she now makes them stop and take a big swig of water. She told me, she said, 14 years of practice, 6 years of college, and that stupid bottle of water is doing more good than anything I've ever done. Just to stop and take a big swig of water is very calming. A similar thing can be done with food. In the emergency room environment, in emergency room psychiatrists, there's something that's sweeping around the world. You have a crackhead or a meth head turn up your ER. They rip open a bag of M&Ms, they shove it in his face, would you like some M&Ms? In many cases, completely diffuse the situation. Now, candy in a dentist's office is maybe not the right response, but just understand how we can pull people from fight or flight to rest and digest. And the big swig of water is really, really powerful. It sends a message to the body, the swallowing. And when you take a big swig, you're actually taking a good, healthy breath. You almost naturally belly breathe when you take that big swig of water to calm people down. So what I want you to understand is this fight or flight response by itself. Now, a week later, a gunshot goes off and you're on that fight or flight response again. This is not PTSD. The DSM tells us PTSD is A, traumatic event. B, you re-experience the event. That's not PTSD. C, you try to avoid thinking about the event. You try to not think about it. You avoid places and people and things that remind you of the event. You cannot not think about it. You will literally drive yourself crazy trying to not think about it. You got to make peace with the memory. You got to separate the memory from the emotions. Thus, that business of the swig of water. Some of you may have heard of CISM, critical incident stress management, debriefings after traumatic event. I teach at their national conference in Baltimore almost every year, their international conference in Baltimore. We all do a debriefing after a traumatic event, but we added one new touch now. Everybody has a bottle of water in front of them. And as everybody talks about what happened, if anybody starts to become emotional, stop, take that swig of water, regain control. I want to talk to you very quickly about what's happening to people up there in fight or flight. Number one is auditory exclusion. The body focuses very intensely on the sense it needs most for survival. Most people in a gunfight, the shots become very muted. The vision becomes very clear. If you're injured or you're down, suddenly the shots are loud, and you're no longer depending on the eyes to fire back. We see this dynamic in which your body will focus intensely on the sense it needs most for survival. Again, in the dentist chair, focusing on what it's going to feel like when the needle goes in and the work gets done. A lot of things can be done. Visually focusing intensely, paying attention to your breathing consciously. The things you can do to tune in the ears, tune in the eyes, and tune out. That's very much what happens with Lamaze, is that process in which you visualize, you got the coach talking to you, you're concentrating on your breathing, you're really super overloading all the senses. So the sense of feel becomes pushed to the edge as you tie up all the brain space available with visual focus, with auditory dynamics, and simultaneously with the breathing process and counting your breathing. But recognize that biological backlash that happens as you re-experience the event. It is not PTSD. It's normal. It becomes PTSD when you try to not think about the event. So the goal is to separate the memory from the emotions. You don't always have a swig of water. You can always stop and breathe. I teach square breathing. It's being used around the world. In 4, hold 4, out 4, hold 4, again and again. Docs are teaching it to little kids. I did it with my grandkids. The doc takes a scented plastic flower and lights a candle and models the behavior. I'm talking to a 3-year-old kid. They're holding their breath. They're freaking their parents out. Doc says it can't do any harm. You're like, bro, I'll show you something right there on the spot. The doc's got the scented candle, the scented flower, lights a candle and models the behavior. Smelling the flower, enjoy it, blow out the candle, watch the smoke. Now you do it. And that fast, the 3-year-old, 4-year-old breathing on command. The parents say it's amazing. It just pulls them right out. They start hyperventilating, or they start holding their breath. It reminds them to breathe. It pulls them right out of it. So understand this dynamic, re-experiencing the event. We know about tunnel vision and auditory exclusion and slow motion time in the event. When a week later, a month later, you re-experience the event, then it becomes counterproductive. Then it becomes, it can turn into PTSD if we don't separate that. A lot of people have that powerful association with the doctor's chair. For me, it's breathing, it's relaxation. I use my breathing in the chair, I use my relaxation, but we need to coach people through that. So just to recap what we're talking about here, this whole business, and by the way, one of the real common things under extreme stress is people to lose loss of bowel and bladder control. Hopefully you don't run into that very often, but in the emergency room, ER people, victims of a traffic accident, very often have messed themselves. And people are are traumatized by it. I'm talking lifelong, humiliated, shattered, traumatized by it. And I train all my mental health providers. I do psychiatric grand rounds at high levels, Department of Defense wide psychiatric grand rounds about a decade ago, piped out to 100 locations around the world. When you're in this ER type environment and you've got somebody who's wet themselves or messed themselves, it is so incredibly important to tell them that's your body's natural response. It happens all the time. Don't worry about it. You can literally save somebody from a lifetime of shame. You might see that a lot more often with young patients, and just be aware of it, understand what's going on. But our goal is to prevent that extreme sympathetic nervous system arousal. How do we do that, right? Breathing, swig of water, and stay focused. Visual stimulus, auditory stimulus as you're talking to the individual. Those are all part of the process. It helps us understand. So we're in the middle of stunningly violent times. And of all the causes of trauma, interpersonal human aggression, violent crime is the most traumatic thing anybody will face. B, we're in the middle of a global epidemic of sleep deprivation, irrational behavior, irrational response. People literally lose their judgment skills as they become sleep deprived. And when you're sleep deprived and bad things happen, you're far more likely to get a post-traumatic response to it. And finally, the physiological response that happens with the sympathetic and parasympathetic, fight or flight, feed and breed backlash, and the fact that a frightened human being is no longer rational. And the tools we use to calm somebody down, that big swig of water, is something that the dentist can use very often. Weave it into what you do far more often. Take that swig of water, get the big, long, hard swig of water, and the breathing that comes with it, and the physiological response to the body that comes with it. It's a powerful tool that you can use far more often to keep people in that zone. And again, be aware that you might trigger a post-traumatic response. When that happens, if some past event is triggered, remember the tools we have available to us is the breathing, and most importantly, that big swig of water, natural way to get somebody to breathe. And if they continue to have a physiological fight or flight response, we really need to be able to refer them to counseling. The docs are very good at treating PTSD. We get better every day. The state of the art in that technology is exploding, and we need to be prepared to put people in the right referral. If you need some kind of dental equipment that you don't necessarily have, you need a microscopic drill that'll do that root canal, you don't hesitate to send them to that person. If they're having extreme fear responses and physiological responses, post-traumatic re-experience of the event, don't hesitate to send them to help and have referral to good people that can help with that. We live in stunningly violent times. We've got people all around us that are sleep deprived and traumatized. Violence has exploded. And you are health providers for providing the resources to them at the hour of greatest need. Be aware of what's out their mind and body. Believe in who you are. Believe in what you do. We need you more than we've ever needed you. We need all of our medical providers to be part of a comprehensive model. I very much like going very much like going to Dr. Angie and getting in the chair. I told her I don't want anybody her to ever put a needle in my mouth. She's so very good at what she does. But it's like listening to my favorite science podcast. That she talks to me about the latest science and research and what's going on. And I might be one of the few patients who actually can kind of understand and apply various aspects of it. She's functioning at levels beyond the simple model that I present as a West Point psychology professor, as a law enforcement or military trainer. But you are pushing the envelope, and she is truly a pioneer doing amazing work in that field. This might give you an overview, a model that you can apply to understand these dynamics in these violent times and what's happening. The bottom line is how tragically bad the situation is. Very much that people need you to be there for them as a caregiver and a comprehensive dynamic, caring for their entire mind-body experience and helping them through the incredible violent times and incredible traumatic times we face right now. I believe in who you are, I believe in what you do, and thank you for being there for folks like me every day. I'd be in a world of hurt without Dr. Angie in my world. And you've got people like that can do the same. Push that envelope, be better at who you are, be better at what you do. Integrate the latest science, integrate the latest research, strive with all your heart and soul to provide state-of-the-art resources. The science is always moving, the knowledge is always moving. Embrace it and run with it. And thank you with all my heart for being out there and for listening with this quick recap of the dynamics that I teach all of our military and all of our law enforcement as a baseline for them to understand what's at their mind and body. God bless you. Thanks for what you do. God bless America.